He once called her the woman who saved his life. But now the world is calling him the man who broke her heart. At 57, Keith Urban stood on a quiet Nashville stage, guitar in hand, singing the song that had defined nearly 2 decades of love and survival, The Fighter. For years, it was his promise to Nicole Kidman, his public thank you set to melody. Every lyric was devotion, every chord redemption. But that night, something changed. Instead of singing, "Just stay, I'll fight for you," Keith paused. His voice softened, and with a single breath, he replaced the line that once defined their love. Sometimes the fight means letting go. The audience froze. Then, as if on cue, hundreds of phones rose into the air. By the next morning, millions had watched the clip, replaying that single moment, dissecting every word, every glance, every silence between notes. Had he just confessed something? Was it a goodbye wrapped in melody? Or had Keith Urban, the man who once credited Nicole for saving him from himself, finally found the courage to stop performing gratitude and start telling his truth? Within hours, headlines erupted. Keith Urban changes lyric. Fans called a betrayal the end of the Urban Kidman love story. Social media turned into a courtroom. Some called it cruel, others called it healing. But behind the noise, there was something deeper, a quiet confession that love built on salvation can one day become a burden too heavy to carry. Because when gratitude becomes a cage, even the kindest hearts eventually look for the key. And that night, Keith Urban might have finally found his. But to understand how a single lyric could set the world on fire, we need to go back to the day love first felt like rescue, and gratitude became the beginning of their beautiful undoing. June 25th, 2006. Sydney shimmered beneath a soft winter sun as Nicole Kidman walked toward the man she called her calm after the storm. Cameras flashed, church bells echoed, and for a moment, it looked like the perfect Hollywood ending. Australia's beloved daughter had found her peace in Nashville's golden son, Keith Urban. To the world, it was a fairy tale. Two stars whose love stories seemed written in the clouds. But even on that radiant day, behind Keith's smile was a quiet shadow. Friends would later say the glow in his eyes hid exhaustion, the kind that doesn't come from work, but from fighting something you can't talk about. The truth was, Keith Urban was already at war with himself. His charm, his success, the endless applause, all of it was covering a private battle with addiction. 4 months after saying "I do," that secret came crashing down. On October 19, 2006, Keith checked himself into rehab, a move that would change both their lives forever. Nicole didn't run from the storm. She walked straight into it. In private, she staged an intervention. In public, she stood silent, refusing to let tabloids define the man she loved. In interviews years later, Keith admitted it plainly. I was very, very blessed that she staged an intervention. I was trying to drown insecurity in applause. While gossip magazines mocked her as the Hollywood rehab bride, those who knew the truth saw something else. A woman refusing to abandon the man she loved, even when his demons tried to. She visited quietly, sent letters, and stayed by his side when it would have been easier to leave. When Keith completed treatment, he told the world, "I came out a free man thanks to her patience." And from that moment on, gratitude became the rhythm of their love. Every stage he stepped on, every award he accepted, every lyric he wrote carried her name, not as a partner, but as a savior. It was beautiful, it was sincere, but even the most devoted thank you can start to sound like a debt. And buried beneath the glitter of their fairy tale wedding was a wound that would shape every note he sang for the next 2 decades. Because love built on rescue feels pure until you realize that one person was never meant to be both lover and lifeline. And as Keith's career rose higher than ever, that line between gratitude and guilt began to blur. By early 2007, Keith Urban was a man reborn, fresh out of rehab, sober, clear-eyed, and armed with the one thing he said he'd almost lost: purpose. He poured every ounce of that rebirth into music. His album Love, Pain, and the Whole Crazy Thing wasn't just a comeback, it was a confession. Each song carried traces of his recovery, his regret, and the woman who refused to give up on him. And everywhere he went, one name followed every thank you. Oh, Nicole! Award stages, interviews, liner notes. It didn't matter. The message was always the same. She saved my life. At first, it was beautiful. The world admired him not just for surviving, but for admitting who helped him do it. To fans, Nicole Kidman became the quiet angel behind his redemption, the Hollywood star who had turned chaos into calm. At the 2008 CMT Awards, Keith opened his acceptance speech with her name before anyone else's. Babe, you saved me, he said, his voice cracking under stage lights. The crowd cheered, the cameras zoomed in, and for a moment, love looked like salvation. But what no one saw was how that same gratitude slowly began to harden into something heavier. When you keep thanking someone for saving you, you start to believe you owe them every breath that follows. And that kind of debt doesn't fade, it quietly grows. Producer Dan Huff later described Keith during those years as a man working like he owes somebody everything. The long tours, the perfectionism, the late nights. It wasn't just ambition, it was repayment. Success became the way Keith said, thank you. Every hit song felt like proof that her faith hadn't been wasted. Meanwhile, Nicole stood beside him, proud but watchful. She'd done what she set out to do, help him heal, but healing comes with an aftershock. Gratitude became their language, but love, real, equal, ordinary love, began to lose its space between the lines. For the world, they were the golden couple who beat the odds. For Keith, every triumph was a reminder of the past he was still trying to outrun. Behind the smiles, the imbalance grew quietly, one built on worship, the other on patience. Because when love turns into a lifelong thank you, even happiness starts to feel like a kind of pressure. And that pressure was only just beginning. By 2011, the fairy tale had settled into routine, two stars orbiting the same love, but on very different schedules. Nicole Kidman's career was soaring again. From Rabbit Hole to Big Little Lies, she was reclaiming her place among Hollywood's elite, collecting awards and critical acclaim in equal measure. Her life became a carousel of flights, film sets, and red carpets. Keith Urban, on the other hand, was living his own whirlwind. Stadium tours, album launches, late night recording sessions, and a new spotlight as a judge on American Idol. From the outside, they looked unstoppable. The perfect couple, balancing fame and family, love and legacy. But behind those red carpet smiles was exhaustion, the kind that doesn't show up in photos. Weeks apart became months. Their connection turned digital. Late night calls, rushed visits, and whispered goodnights over phone lines instead of beside each other. Nicole once told Vanity Fair, love takes coordination, but coordination can't replace connection. Keith began pouring his loneliness into music. Songs about missing home, about holding on through chaos, about peace that never lasted long enough. In one interview, he admitted softly, music is my therapy. And therapy meant facing himself. Not the man the world saw, but the one still trying to believe he deserved the life he'd been given. Friends noticed the shift. Keith still adored Nicole, but the weight of gratitude never really left him. He wasn't just a husband, he was the man she'd saved, still trying to be worthy of that rescue. And while Nicole's patience remained, her tone became quieter, her words softer. They still laughed, still showed up together, but something in their energy had changed. A kind of tired love that knows how to smile even when it aches. From the public, they were unshakable, proof that love conquers everything. For themselves, they were learning that love sometimes just endures. Because when two people spend years holding each other up, they can forget what it feels like to simply stand side by side. And soon, that silent distance would find its voice. In the one place Keith Urban had always told his truth, his music. When The Fighter dropped in 2017, it felt like a victory lap, a love song born from everything Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman had survived together. Co-written and performed with Carrie Underwood, it was upbeat, catchy, and pure devotion on tape. Just stay, don't you dare give up, I'll fight for you. Those words became an anthem, not just for fans, but for their entire relationship. Every performance was electric. Fans saw it as a love letter to Nicole. His public promise that no matter how hard things got, he'd always fight for her. They sang along, tears in their eyes, believing they were witnessing a couple who'd conquered every storm. And for a while, it was true. On stage, Keith would flash that familiar grin, glance at Nicole in the crowd, and sing like the world was whole again. But behind the curtain, that same song carried a different weight. Each time he performed it, it pulled him back to the beginning, the rehab, the rescue, the debt of gratitude he'd spent years trying to repay. To fans, The Fighter was romantic. To Keith, it had become a reminder. The melody that once symbolized recovery now whispered of imbalance, a man still saying thank you when he just wanted to say, I'm okay now. Nicole, ever graceful, kept smiling beside him. She still danced to the rhythm of their story, even as the lyrics began to feel heavier. In one interview, she'd quietly said, marriage is a dance. Sometimes one leads, sometimes both get lost. And lost was exactly what they were becoming. Not angry, not distant, just quietly misplaced inside a story they'd already told too many times. Because when your love becomes a song, it stops being just yours. It belongs to the world, replayed, romanticized, and frozen in time. And every time Keith sang those words, he's being asked to relive a version of himself he no longer recognized. By 2025, that weight reached its breaking point. One night, one stage, one line, everything changed. But sometimes rewriting a lyric isn't about the music. It's about finally telling the truth the melody's been hiding all along. It happened on a crisp October night in 2025, the kind of night meant for nostalgia, not revelation. Keith Urban walked onto a dimly lit stage in Nashville for what fans thought would be another easy, familiar concert. No surprises, just Keith, his guitar, and the song that had defined a generation of love stories, The Fighter. But halfway through, something shifted. His voice, steady at first, cracked ever so slightly. The band slowed, sensing something unplanned. Then, as the crowd mouthed along to the famous line, just stay, I'll fight for you, Keith stopped. He took a breath, and then came 6 words that sent the internet spiraling. As a fight means letting go. The silence that followed was thick enough to feel. The audience froze, phones in midair, eyes wide. Even his guitarist glanced over, uncertain whether to keep playing. Keith didn't explain. He didn't smile. He just closed his eyes and let the new line echo into the rafters, softer but sharper than anything he'd sung before. By the time the clip hit social media, it was everywhere. Within hours, the Fighter lyric change was trending worldwide. Millions of fans dissected the moment frame by frame, searching for meaning. Some said he looked heartbroken. Others claimed they saw relief. And the question spread like wildfire. Was this Keith's way of saying goodbye? Comments flooded in. Is he divorcing Nicole?